Abraham views heaven and earth. The archangel Michael went down, took Abraham up on a chariot of the cherubim, and lifted him into the air, setting him on a cloud together with 60 angels. Abraham then flew the chariot all over the earth, and saw all things on the earth, both good and bad. Looking down, he saw a man committing adultery with a married woman, and turning to Michael said, "Send fire from heaven to consume them." Straightway there came down fire and destroyed them, for God had commanded Michael to do whatever Abraham should ask. He looked again, and he saw thieves digging through a house, and Abraham said, "Let wild beasts come out of the desert and tear them to pieces." Immediately wild beasts came out of the desert and devoured them. Again he looked down, and he saw people preparing to commit murder, and he said, "Let the earth open and swallow them." And as he spoke, the earth swallowed them alive. Then God said to Michael, "Turn Abraham back to his own house, and let him not go round the whole world, because he has no compassion on sinners. But I do have compassion on sinners, that they may turn, live, repent of their sins, and be saved." So Michael turned the chariot and brought Abraham to the place of judgment of all souls. There he saw 2 gates, the one broad, the other narrow. The narrow gate is that of the just, which leads to life. They that enter through it go to paradise. The broad gate is that of sinners, which leads to destruction and eternal punishment. Then Abraham wept, saying, "Woe is me! What shall I do? For I am a big fat man. How can I enter the narrow gate?" Michael answered, "Do not fear. You'll get through it easy enough, as will all the other pious like you." Abraham, seeing a soul that was about to be judged before God, asked Michael the reason for it. And Michael answered, "Because the previous judge found its sins and its goodness equal, so he did not know whether to condemn or save it." Abraham then said to Michael, "Let's pray for this soul, and see whether God will hear us." When they rose up from their prayer, Michael informed Abraham that the soul had been saved by the prayer, and was taken by an angel and carried up to paradise. Then Abraham said to Michael, "Let us call upon the Lord, and supplicate his compassion, and entreat his mercy for the souls of the sinners who I formerly, in my anger, cursed and destroyed, those who the earth devoured, and the wild beasts tore in pieces, and the fire consumed through my words. Because now I know I have sinned before the Lord our God." After the joint prayer of the archangel and Abraham, there came a voice from heaven saying, "Abraham, I have heard your voice and your prayer, and I forgive you your sin, and the sins of those you think I destroyed. I have called them up and brought them to life by my exceeding kindness, because in this case I have interrupted their judgment. For those who I destroy living upon the earth, I will not give another chance in death." When Michael brought Abraham back to his house, they found Sarah dead. Not seeing what had become of Abraham, she was consumed with grief, and gave up her soul. Though Michael had fulfilled Abraham's wish, and shown him all the earth, and judgment, and recompense, he still refused to surrender his soul to Michael. And the archangel again ascended to heaven, and said to the Lord, "So speaks Abraham, I will not go with you." And I, Michael, refrained from laying my hands on him, because from the beginning he was your friend, and he has done all things pleasing in your sight. There is no man like him on earth, not even Job, the wondrous man. But when the day of the death of Abraham drew near, God commanded Michael to adorn death with great beauty, that he might see him with his own eyes. While sitting under the oak of Mamre, Abraham perceived a flashing of light and a smell of sweet odor, and he turned and saw death coming toward him in great glory and beauty. Then death said, Do not think, Abraham, that this beauty is mine, or that I come so to every man. But if anyone is righteous like you, I come to him with a crown. But if he is a sinner, I come in great corruption, and out of their sins I make a crown for my head, and I shake them with great fear so that they are terrified. Abraham said to him, Are you the one who is called Death? Death answered, I am the bitter name. But Abraham answered, I will not go with you. Abraham said even more to Death, Show us your corruption. And Death revealed his corruption and horror, showing two heads. The one had the face of a serpent, the other was like a sword. All the servants of Abraham, seeing the fierceness of Death, died. But Abraham prayed to the Lord, and the Lord brought them back to life. As Abraham's soul did not depart him, even in the face of death, God removed the soul of Abraham as in a dream, and the archangel Michael took it up to heaven. After great praise and glory had been given to the Lord by the angels who brought Abraham's soul, and after Abraham bowed down to worship, then came the voice of God, saying, Take my friend Abraham to paradise, to the tabernacles of my righteous ones, and the abodes of my saints, Isaac and Jacob, where there is no trouble, nor grief, nor sighing, but only peace, rejoicing, and life unending. Abraham's activity did not cease with his death, and as he interceded in this world for sinners, so will he intercede for them in the world to come. On the day of judgment he will sit at the gate of hell, and he will not suffer those who kept the law of circumcision to enter that place. The Patron of Hebron. Once upon a time some Jews lived in Hebron, few in number, but pious and good, and particularly hospitable. When strangers came to the cave of Machpelah to pray, the inhabitants of the place actually quarreled with each other for the privilege of entertaining the guest, and the one who carried off the victory rejoiced as though he had found great treasure. On the eve of the Day of Atonement, it appeared that in spite of all their efforts, the dwellers at Hebron could not secure the 10th man needed for public divine service, and they feared they would only have 9 on the holy day. Toward evening, as the sun was setting, they found an old man with a silver-white beard bearing a sack upon his shoulders, his clothes tattered, and his feet badly swollen from walking. They ran to meet him, took him to one of the houses, gave him food and drink, and after supplying him with new white garments, they all together went to the synagogue for worship. Asked what his name was, the stranger replied, Abraham. At the end of the fast, the residents of Hebron cast lots for the privilege of entertaining the guest. Fortune favored the weaver, who, now the envy of the rest, took his guest to his house. On the way, Abraham suddenly disappeared, and the weaver could not find him anywhere. In vain, all the Jews of the place went on a search for him. Their sleepless night, spent in searching, had no result. The stranger could not be found. But no sooner did the weaver lay down, toward morning, weary and anxious to catch some sleep, than he saw the lost guest before him. His face luminous as lightning, and his garments magnificent and studded with gems, radiant as the sun. But before the weaver, stunned by fright, could open his mouth, the stranger spoke and said, I am Abraham the Hebrew, your ancestor, who rests here in the cave of Machpelah. When I saw how grieved you were at not having the number of men prescribed for a public service, I came to you. Have no fear. Rejoice and be merry of heart. On another occasion, Abraham granted his assistance to the people of Hebron. The lord of the city was a heartless man who oppressed the Jews severely. He commanded them to pay a large sum of money into his treasury, the whole sum in the best of coins, all stamped with the same year. It was but a pretext to kill the Jews. He knew that his demand was impossible to fulfill. The Jews proclaimed a fast and a day of public prayer on which to supplicate God that he turn aside the sword hanging over their heads. The following night, the weaver, in a dream, saw an awe-inspiring old man, who addressed him in the following words, Quickly, run to the gate of the court. There lies the money you need. I am your father Abraham. I have seen the affliction by which the Gentiles oppress you. God has heard your groans." In great terror, the weaver arose and went to the spot designated by the vision. He found the money and took it to the congregation, telling them of his dream at the same time. Amazed, they counted the gold, precisely the amount required by the prince, no more and no less. They surrendered the sum to the prince, and he who had considered compliance with his demand impossible recognized now that God is with the Jews, and from then on they found favor in his eyes. The birth of Esau and Jacob. Isaac was the image of his father in body and soul. He resembled him in every way, in beauty, wisdom, strength, wealth, and noble deeds. It was, therefore, as great an honor for Isaac to be called the son of his father as for Abraham to be called the father of his son. And though Abraham was the progenitor of 30 nations, he is always designated as the father of Isaac. Despite his many excellent qualities, Isaac married late in life. God permitted him to meet the wife suitable to him only after he had successfully disproved the mocking charges of Ishmael, who was in the habit of taunting him with having been circumcised at the early age of 8 days, while Ishmael had submitted himself voluntarily to the operation when he was 13. For this reason, God demanded Isaac as a sacrifice when he had attained to full manhood at the age of 37, and found Isaac was ready to give up his life. Ishmael's jibes were thus robbed of their sting, and Isaac was permitted to marry. But another delay occurred before his marriage could take place. Directly after the sacrifice on Mount Moriah, his mother died, and he mourned her for 3 years. Finally, he married Rebekah, who was then a maiden of 14. Rebekah was a rose between thorns. Her father was the Aramean Bethuel, and her brother was Laban, but she did not walk in their wicked ways. Her piety was equal to Isaac's. Nevertheless, their marriage was not entirely happy, for they lived together no less than 20 years without children. Rebekah asked Isaac to entreat God for the gift of children, as Abraham had done. At first, Isaac would not do her bidding. God had promised Abraham a numerous progeny, and he thought their childlessness was probably Rebekah's fault, so that it was her duty to supplicate God, not his. But Rebekah would not desist. So husband and wife went to Mount Moriah to pray. Isaac said, "O Lord God of heaven and earth, whose goodness and mercies fill the earth, you who took my father from his father's house to this land, saying to him, 'To you and your seed I will give the land promised,' and declared to him, 'I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven, and as of the sands of the sea.' Now may your words be proven true, for you are the Lord our God." Isaac also prayed that all children destined for him might be born from his pious wife Rebekah, and Rebekah made the same petition regarding her husband, and the children destined for her. Their united prayer was heard, yet it was chiefly for the sake of Isaac that God gave them children. It is true, Rebekah's piety equaled her husband's, but the prayer of a pious man, who is the son of a pious man, is far more efficacious than the prayer of one who is descended from a godless father. The prayer brought a great miracle, for Isaac's physique was such that he could not have been expected to beget children, and equally it was not in the course of nature that Rebekah should bear children. When Rebekah had been pregnant 7 months, she began to wish that the curse of childlessness had not been removed. She suffered torturous pain, because her twin sons began their lifelong quarrels in her womb. They strove to kill each other. If Rebekah walked in the vicinity of a temple erected to idols, Esau moved in her body, and if she passed a synagogue or academy, Jacob tried to jump right out of her womb. The quarrels of the children turned on such differences as these. Esau would insist that there was no life except the earthly life of material pleasures. Jacob would reply, "My brother, There are two worlds, this world and the world to come. In this world, men eat, drink, barter, and marry, and bring up sons and daughters. But all this does not take place in the world to come. If it pleases you, you can have this world, and I will take the next. Esau had Samael as his ally in desiring to slay Jacob in his mother's womb, but the archangel Michael hastened to Jacob's aid. He tried to burn Samael, and the Lord saw it was necessary to constitute a heavenly court for the purpose of arbitrating the case of Michael and Samael. Even the quarrel between the two brothers regarding the birthright had its beginning before they emerged from the womb. Each desired to be the first to come into the world. It was only when Esau threatened to carry his point at the expense of his mother's life that Jacob gave way. Rebekah asked the other women whether they too had suffered such pain during their pregnancy, and when they told her they had not heard of a case like hers except the pregnancy of Nimrod's mother, she went to Mount Moriah, where Shem and Eber had their academy. She requested them, as well as Abraham, to inquire of God what the cause of her dire suffering was. And Shem replied, "My daughter, I confide a secret to you. See to it that no one finds it out. 2 nations are in your womb, and how could your body contain them, seeing that the whole world will not be large enough for them to exist together peaceably? 2 nations they are, each owning a world of its own. The one, the Torah, the other, sin. From the one will spring Solomon, the builder of the temple. From the other, Vespasian, the destroyer of the temple. These 2 are what are needed to raise the number of nations to 70. They will never be in accord. Esau will vaunt lords, while Jacob will bring forth prophets. And if Esau has princes, Jacob will have kings. They, Israel and Arabia, are the 2 nations destined to be hated by the whole world. One will exceed the other in strength. First, Esau will subjugate the whole world, but in the end, Jacob will rule. The older of the 2 will serve the younger, provided this one is pure of heart. Otherwise, the younger will be enslaved by the older." The circumstances connected with the birth of her twin sons were as remarkable as those of the period of her pregnancy. Esau was the first to see the light, and with him all impurity came from the womb. Jacob was born clean and sweet of body. Esau was brought forth with hair, beard, and teeth, both front and back, and he was blood red, a sign of his future nature. On account of his ruddy appearance, he remained uncircumcised. Isaac, his father, feared that it was due to poor circulation of the blood, and he hesitated to perform the operation, until Esau should attain his 13th year, the age at which Ishmael had received the sign of the covenant. But when Esau grew up, he refused to give heed to his father's wish, and so he was left uncircumcised. The opposite of his brother in all respects, Jacob was born with the sign of the covenant on his body, a rare distinction. But Esau also bore a mark on him at birth, the figure of a serpent, the symbol of all that is wicked and hated by God. The names given the brothers were filled with meaning. The older was called Esau because he was Asui, fully developed when he was born, and the name of the younger was given to him by God, to point to some important events in the future of Israel by the numerical value of each letter. The first letter in Yod, with the value of 10, stands for the Decalogue. The second, Ayin, equal to 70, for the 70 elders, the leaders of Israel. The third, Kaf, 100, for the temple, 100 ells in height. And the last, Bet, for the 2 tables of stone. The favorite of Abraham. While Esau and Jacob were little, their characters could not be judged properly. They were like the myrtle and the thorn bush, which look alike in the early stages of their growth. After they have attained full size, the myrtle is known for its sweet fragrance, and the thorn bush by its thorns. In their childhood, both brothers went to school, but when they reached their 13th year and were of age, their ways parted. Jacob continued his studies in the academy of Shem and Eber, but Esau abandoned himself to idolatry and an immoral life. Both were hunters of men. Esau tried to capture them in order to turn them away from God, and Jacob to turn them toward God. In spite of his impious deeds, Esau won his father's love. His hypocritical conduct made Isaac believe that his firstborn son was extremely pious. "Father," he would ask Isaac, "what is the tithe on straw and salt?" The question made him appear God-fearing in the eyes of his father, because these two products are the very ones that are exempt from tithing. Isaac failed to notice, too, that his older son gave him forbidden food to eat. What he took for the flesh of young goats was dog's meat. Rebekah was more clear-sighted. She knew her sons as they really were, and therefore her love for Jacob was very great. The more she heard his voice, the deeper grew her affection. Abraham agreed with her. He also loved his grandson Jacob, for he knew that by him his name and his seed would be called. And he said to Rebekah, "My daughter, watch over my son Jacob, for he shall take my place on earth as a blessing in the midst of the children of men, and the glory of the whole seed of Shem." Having admonished Rebekah to keep guard over Jacob, who was also destined to be the bearer of the blessing given to Abraham by God, he called for his grandson, and in the presence of Rebekah he blessed him and said, "Jacob, my beloved grandson, whom my soul loves, may God bless you from above the firmament, and may he give you all the blessings that he gave Adam, Enoch, Noah, and Shem, and all the things of which he told me, and all the things which he promised to give me. May he cause them to cling to you and to your descendants forever, and the spirit of Mastema shall not rule over you, or over your seed, to turn you away from the Lord, who is your God, now and forever. And may the Lord God be a father to you, and may you be his firstborn son, and may God be a father to your people, always. Go in peace, my son." Abraham had good reason to be fond of Jacob, for it was due to the merits of his grandson that he had been rescued from the fiery furnace. Isaac and Rebekah, knowing of Abraham's love for their young son, sent their father a meal by Jacob on the last feast of Pentecost which Abraham was permitted to celebrate on earth, that he might eat and bless the Creator of all things before he died. Abraham knew that his end was approaching, and he thanked the Lord for all the good he had granted him during the days of his life, and he blessed Jacob and bade him to walk in the ways of the Lord, and especially he was not to marry a daughter of the Canaanites. Then Abraham prepared for death. He placed 2 of Jacob's fingers on his eyes, and thus holding them close, he fell into his eternal sleep, while Jacob lay beside him on the bed. The lad did not know of his grandfather's death until he called him the next morning, saying, "Abraham, Abraham," and received no answer. The sale of the birthright. Though Abraham reached a good old age, beyond the limit of years given to later generations, he yet died 5 years before his allotted time. The intention was to let him live to be 180 years, the same age as Isaac's at his death, but on account of Esau, God brought his life to an abrupt close. For some time, Esau had been pursuing his evil inclinations in secret. Finally, he dropped his mask, and on the day of Abraham's death, he was guilty of 5 crimes. He ravished a betrothed maiden, committed murder, doubted the resurrection of the dead, scorned the birthright, and denied God. Then the Lord said, "I promised Abraham that he should go to his fathers in peace. Can I now permit him to be witness of his grandson's rebellion, his violation of the laws of chastity, and his shedding of blood? It is better for him to die now in peace." The men slain by Esau on this day were Nimrod and 2 of his officers. A long-standing feud had existed between Esau and Nimrod, because the mighty hunter before the Lord was jealous of Esau, who also devoted himself assiduously to the chase. On that day he was hunting, it happened that Nimrod was separated from his people. Only 2 men were with him. Esau, who lay in ambush, noticed his isolation and waited until he should pass his hiding spot. Then he threw himself on Nimrod suddenly and killed him and his 2 companions who ran to his aid. The outcries of the latter brought the attendants of Nimrod to the spot where Nimrod lay dead, but not before Esau had stripped him of his garments and fled to the city. As you recall, these garments of Nimrod had an extraordinary effect on cattle, beasts, and birds. Of their own accord, they would come and prostrate themselves before him who was dressed in them. Thus Nimrod, and Esau after him, were able to rule over men and beasts. After slaying Nimrod, Esau ran to the city in great fear of his subjects. Tired and exhausted, he arrived at home to find Jacob busy preparing a dish of lentils. Numerous male and female slaves were in Isaac's household. Nevertheless, Jacob was so simple and modest in his demeanor that if he came home late from the academy, he would disturb no one to prepare his meal, but do it for himself. On this occasion he was cooking lentils for his father, to serve him as his grieving meal after the death of Abraham. Adam and Eve had eaten lentils after the murder of Abel, and so had the parents of Haran when he perished in the fiery furnace. The reason they are used for the grieving meal is that the round lentil symbolizes death. As the lentil rolls, so death, sorrow, and mourning constantly roll about men, from one to another. Esau accosted Jacob, saying, "Why are you preparing lentils?" Jacob, "Because our grandfather passed away. They shall be a sign of my grief and mourning, that he may love me in the days to come." Esau, "You fool! Do you really think it possible that man should come to life again after he has died and mouldered in the grave?" He continued to taunt Jacob. "Why do you give yourself so much trouble? Look around you. All men eat whatever comes to hand, fish, creeping and crawling creatures, pig's flesh, and all sorts of things, and you vex yourself about a dish of lentils?" Jacob, "If we act like other men, what shall we do on the day of the Lord, the day on which the pious will receive their reward, when a herald will proclaim, 'Where is he that weighs the deeds of men? Where is he that counts?'" Esau, "Is there a future world? Will the dead be called back to life? If it were so, why has not Adam returned? Have you seen Noah lately? Has he reappeared? How about our grandfather Abraham, the friend of God, more beloved of him than any man? Has he come to life again?" Jacob, "If you are of the opinion that there is no future world, and that the dead do not rise to a new life, why then do you want your birthright? Sell it to me, now, while it is yet possible to do. Once the Torah is revealed, it cannot be done. Truly, there is a future world, in which the righteous receive their reward. I tell you this, so you cannot say later, 'I deceived you.'" Jacob was little concerned about the double share of the inheritance that went with the birthright. What he thought of was the priestly service, which was the prerogative of the firstborn, and Jacob was horrified at the thought his impious brother Esau play the priest, he who despised all divine service. The scorn manifested by Esau for the resurrection of the dead, he felt also for the promise of God to give the Holy Land to the seed of Abraham. He did not believe in it, and therefore he was willing to give up his birthright in exchange for a mess of pottage. In addition, Jacob paid him in coin, and besides, he gave him what was more than money, the wonderful sword of Methuselah, which Isaac had inherited from Abraham and bestowed upon Jacob. Esau, of course, mocked Jacob. He invited his friends to feast at his brother's table, saying, "See what I did to this Jacob? I ate his lentils, drank his wine, amused myself at his expense, and sold my birthright to him." All that Jacob replied was, Eat, and may it do you good." But the Lord said, "Esau, you despise the birthright. Therefore I shall make you despised by all generations." And by way of punishment for denying God and the resurrection of the dead, the descendants of Esau were cut off from the world. As nothing was holy to Esau, Jacob made him swear concerning the birthright by the life of their father, for he knew Esau's love for Isaac was strong. Nor did he fail to have a document made out, duly signed by witnesses, setting forth that Esau had sold him the birthright, together with his claim on a place in the cave of Machpelah. Though no blame can be attached to Jacob for all this, yet in a sense he secured the birthright by cunning, and therefore the descendants of Jacob had to serve the descendants of Esau. Next, Isaac with the Philistines. End part 17 of 95, thelegendsofthejews.com.